Welcome to my lovely work office. We're going to start today talking about presentational aids. When we think of presentational aids, most of us think of using PowerPoint, and that's just fine. But you can also use poster boards. Since most of you probably won't have access to a projector for your final presentation, I'm going to ask if you can't use a projector. If you can, great, use that and use PowerPoint. But if you can't, then you can make a poster that would look exactly like a PowerPoint slide. And you'll use one poster per slide. So for your final, in other words, for your final presentation, what you're going to do is you're going to take an already existing presentation that you've done, and you're going to redo it using a presentational aid. So, like I said, you can either use PowerPoint with a projector if you have that available. If you do, that's great. If not, that's fine too. If you don't have it, then I want you to make poster board slides that would emulate or look exactly like you would do a PowerPoint slide. For your assignments on Blackboard, I would like for you to use PowerPoint for those assignments. And then if you're using a poster board for your actual presentation, just use that for your presentation. Don't use it for the mini assignments. Okay, so let's talk about what that's going to look like. The first thing that I want you to think about is how we view presentational aids. A lot of times when we're talking about using PowerPoint specifically, we say we're going to do a PowerPoint presentation. That's completely false. What we're doing is we're going to do a presentation utilizing PowerPoint. PowerPoint is not the presentation, you are the presentation. So you have to maintain the focus of the audience. And you can do this several ways, but the first thing that we're going to talk about is by focusing on presentational skills. So what you're doing, all the rules of what we've already talked about, still stand. So you want to make sure you're standing, you want to make sure that you're in the center of the camera, or the center of the room. You want to make sure that you remain genuine and use gestures. Keep the audience's attention. Repeat, repeat, repeat. We've talked about all these things, and I'm sure you all understand them perfectly. If you don't, feel free to shoot me an email. But there are two things that I also want you to remember when you're using a presentational aid, and these two things happen a lot with people who aren't comfortable giving presentations. But by now, you are all comfortable at giving presentations, and you're all wonderful at it. So this should be easy for you. The first thing I want you to remember is to never stand in front of your presentational aid, because let's just think about this logically. If you're standing in front of it, people aren't going to be able to see it. So that's going to be a big problem, obviously. The second thing is never read off the slides. So say you have a PowerPoint. A lot of people tend to turn and face the PowerPoint and read off the presentation. That's simply not good. That's how you make it into a PowerPoint presentation. You want the focus to stay on you. I know that sounds really uncomfortable, but you are great speakers. You can do this. You want them to focus on your information that you're giving, not on the PowerPoint presentation, not on the PowerPoint side of things. So never turn and read off of it. It makes you look like you are not credible, you don't know what you're talking about, you're not familiar with the topic, and you didn't practice, and you never want to portray to your audience any of those things. The next thing I want you to remember when you're doing a presentation is to have the fewest slides possible. The reason why I know that when we think about PowerPoint, we want to do as many slides as possible so that we have this crutch to stand on, to help us stay up, to help us stay afloat. But we want to keep it to as few slides as possible so it doesn't become, once again, a PowerPoint presentation. Because you want to, again, remain the focus, and if you're constantly flipping slides, people are going to be reading those slides and paying attention to those slides instead of paying attention to what you're saying. So now that we talked about presentation skills, we're going to talk about actual what to do with those individual slides or those individual poster boards. The first thing that I want you to remember is accessibility. You want your PowerPoint slides to be accessible to anyone in the room. You want them, think about it if you were in a classroom. You want the person on the very back row to be able to see and read and understand what's on your PowerPoint slide. You also want someone who has low vision, meaning that they have really bad eyes, like me. As you can see, I have really big glasses. I have pretty bad eyes. And so if there's a lot, so you want to make sure that someone like me can read your PowerPoint or whatever is on your slide or poster board. So you want to make sure that you have really big letters. One way that you can really make sure that we can read and clearly delineate what's on your PowerPoint is to make sure that your background is white and your text is black. I know a lot of you are shouting, but I want to use a template. I want it to be really pretty. Don't do that, because black and white have the most contrast. It makes it the easiest to see. Also, whenever you have multiple colors on a slide, it becomes distracting, and again, it becomes a PowerPoint presentation instead of a presentation utilizing PowerPoint, and we don't want that. So make sure that you are doing black text, again, black text with a white background, because it makes it clean. It makes it so that people who have low vision like me can read it, and it makes sure that the people in the back row can read it. The next thing that I want you to remember is to only have one picture, and do not have this picture as your background, obviously. You can have one picture per slide, and you need to have one picture per slide. It's really important that you don't put multiple pictures, because again, that's really distracting, and you don't want it to turn into a PowerPoint presentation. You don't want people to zone out about the pictures and be distracted by all of the pictures. So you want to have one picture per slide. The next thing that I want you to remember is the 6x6 rule. So on a PowerPoint slide or on a presentational aid, you can have a title at the top, and then you can have 6 lines with 6 words max on each line per slide or per poster board. The reason why we do this is because, again, you want it to be able to be read at the back of the room, and if you have any more words than that, then it becomes, the font has to get so small to fit on the poster board or on the PowerPoint that people can't read it anymore. So you want to make sure to have as big of letters as you can without being distracting, of course. So you want to keep to the 6x6 rule. If you have any questions about these things, go ahead and ask me. And the final thing that I want you to remember when you're doing a PowerPoint, is to keep it simple, or whenever you're doing a poster board. Keep it simple, silly. The KISS rule. Keep it simple, silly. Yeah, that's it. Not stupid, right? Anyways, so when we're keeping it simple, the main thing that I want you to remember is no animations. I know we all want to have these things zooming from the side, or flashing, or having pictures zoom in everywhere, or have each line come in on its own. Don't do that. It's distracting. You don't want it to be about the PowerPoint. You don't want it to be about the presentational aid. You want your presentation to be about you. So you're not going to do the animations. You're not going to have silly, cutesy bullet points or anything like that. You're going to keep it as simple and as clean as possible. That way, you're just putting your main points, the headline of your main points on each slide. That way, if you do get lost, you can just glance over to it, and it lets your audience know where you're going and where you've been, those kinds of things. I want you to go ahead and look at the sample PowerPoint that I will have posted very shortly on Blackboard. And I want you to emulate that whenever you do your assignments and when you do your actual presentation. It's not going to be exactly like you would do it, obviously, but it follows the rules that I've just described. It's not going to be on a topic that we have discussed or anything like that. I want to put this in perspective for you about the number of slides that you should do. When we think about PowerPoint presentations, we want to do a whole lot of slides, like I said, because it makes us more comfortable. It gives us a crutch. I typically use about 7 slides for an hour presentation. Kid you not. I don't expect that from you, but for your short for as short as your presentations are, I want you to have that idea that do as few as possible. You should have 1 per main point on your speech. You should have 1 slide. So you should have 1 slide for your introduction, 1 slide for body point 1, 1 slide for body point 2, 1 slide for bullet point 3, and 1 slide for your conclusion. If you really want to, you can also put a slide that is your preview of points. that's completely acceptable. And I'll show you how those look like in the sample presentation, simple PowerPoint thing. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me. I just remembered one more thing that you really need to know. When we think about pictures on PowerPoint slides, we have this urge to make a really big impact, but we need to think about, are these pictures going to be distracting to my audience? So if you're redoing your persuasive speech and you did something like world hunger, it would make a huge impact to show people starving, obviously, but we need to make sure that we aren't exploiting people. We want to make sure that we aren't going to be distracting people with some very, very harsh or offensive images. So if someone has a personal experience with what you're talking about, if you show a picture of something that they may have experienced, that might be completely distracting for them. For example, let's say someone in this class has been a victim of gun violence. You probably don't want to show a picture of someone getting shot or someone who's been shot. That is a little too violent. You want to keep it PG-13 or PG when we are looking at these pictures. So if you wouldn't want your child to see that picture, don't put it on your presentation, because if it's going to trigger something, if it may trigger something in one of your audience members, that means that they're not focusing on your presentation anymore. They're focusing on their past experiences. So you want to make sure that your pictures aren't going to be offensive in any way, which means if you have a political agenda with your picture, don't put it on there. If you have a religious agenda with your picture, if you're showing a religious agenda, don't put it on there. I think most of you chose topics that it'll be okay, that you won't have this trouble. But if they're too gruesome, like if you showed a car crash and you showed someone dying on the side of the road, that might be a little too far. You may be able to show a car crash without a victim, and that would be okay. But you want to be really careful and mindful of what your audience members may have experienced in their past. So that's all I got. I will talk to you soon, and I look forward to your presentations.